In this live stream, I wanted to talk about pets in the afterlife. What happens to animals in general when they die? Do they have an afterlife? Is it different than human afterlife? That sort of thing. And I did this as a live stream because I don't have like a set bunch of points that I want to make. It's just something that I wanted to discuss and have some interaction with. So if you have any kind of questions or comments or ideas that you wanted to share, let me know. I'll read them in the live stream. And if you're watching this video after the fact, definitely leave a comment in the video below, and I respond to almost every comment that I get on any of my videos, even the new ones and the old ones as well. So, we got a couple people here. Stuart, where is it here? Whoops. Hi there. And Restless TV says thumbs up. Hi everybody. Thanks for stopping. Oh. Lost my camera there. Sorry about that. The perils of live streaming. G.A. Morris, ciao. Hi. How's it going? Big fan of your work, Restless TV says. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So the reason that I wanted to do this topic in particular was actually because I lost a pet recently. My beloved dog, Cinnamon. She was with me almost 19 years. She would have been 19 years old in October. Actually, we would celebrate her birthday on Halloween. Wasn't sure exactly if that was a specific day, but it was pretty close. But yeah, she was almost 19 years old. That's really old for a dog. And yeah, she was with me longer than almost everybody in my life, except for, like family and stuff. But yeah, it was pretty sad. But she didn't really suffer very much. It was pretty quick. So that is one good thing about it, that she did. It wasn't long drawn out suffering for the dog. Yeah. Sin says, Jeremy, nice seeing you live. I'm glad that you managed to pop in. Incredible age for a dog, Sture says. Yeah, that is very long age for a dog. Almost 19 years old. This is Restless TV says, this has been a concern for us. Sad for your loss. Sin says, sad for your loss. It's like losing a family member. Absolutely. G.A. Morris, my cat Sharky died at 17 in 2018. He was born in 2001, and the gray areas on his body matched Mars. Oh, that's really cool. Sorry for your loss, G.A. Morris. I fully understand, especially when you've had a pet for that long. That's almost 2 decades, They definitely feel like a part of the family. Absolutely. Yeah, my dog, Cinnamon, she was a very sweet dog. Probably the sweetest dog I ever met, and I'm not just saying that because it was my dog and I loved her, but which is true. But yeah, she was a very, very sweet dog. She didn't really like toys that much. It's funny, she had when she was just a puppy, she had this little stuffed lamb that she used to play with, and then eventually it got destroyed in the process of playing with it, and she never liked another toy after that. So it's kind of weird, unusual for a dog. But this I wanted to talk about the afterlife of pets. Do all dogs go to heaven, as the saying goes? Actually, one funny thing that to lighten the mood a little, I heard a joke about how people sometimes will say, oh, now the dog is up in heaven chasing squirrels or something like that. And made me think, well, where are all those squirrels coming from? Are those squirrels that are... Is dog heaven the same thing as squirrel hell? Like, what did those squirrels do to end up in hell to be chased for eternity by all these good dogs? um, but yeah, I don't believe in anything as simplistic or juvenile as heaven and hell, kind of dualistic concepts such as that in terms of the afterlife. But well, one thing I do want to say though is that I believe that when people say, what happens to animals when they die, in terms of do animals have an afterlife? Well, you're asking, the question you're asking is also the same thing as it about humans, because humans are animals as well. Something that people don't think about sometimes, a lot of people fully accept the fact that humans are a species of animal, but there's a lot of people that they think that's insulting. They're like, oh, what? Not I'm not an animal, or how dare you call me an animal? It's humans are animals. We're a species of animals. So if you want to know whether animals have an afterlife or not, basically it's the same. We are animals. So it's a very important question in terms of personal to us, not just to the animals we knew, because every human that we knew is also an animal. Yeah, Canada Bear, hi. I'm glad you managed to drop into the live stream this time. It's a scientific fact. Exactly. I mean, what else are we if we're not animals, I mean, we've got hearts and lungs and blood and, we're not plants. We're not fungi. We're not bacterium or viruses, although a huge number of cells that compose what I guess you could call our body are actually bacteria and things like that. But they're a component of the superorganism of the human animal. And all animals are like that. All animals have a microbiome, as you call it. But we're not bacteria. We're not fungi. We're not plants. We're animals, I mean, sorry to drive the point home like that, but some people need to be reminded. G.A. Morris says, our advancements set us apart. Well, yeah, each species of animal has different traits. Some are better than others at different things. Humans are really good at using tools. No other animal is nearly as good at using tools as humans are. But we're not as fast. We can't run as fast as a lot of animals. We're not as strong, physically strong as a lot of animals. There's a lot of things like that. We don't have exoskeletons. We've got squishy bodies. So yeah, there's always things that set every species of animal apart, not just humans. Every species of animal has something that sets them apart from the other ones. So you can't say humans are not animals because we're different than other animals, at least in my opinion. And it's backed up by scientific fact, which doesn't really mean a heck of a lot, really, because science gets a lot of stuff wrong. But Serge Midturn said, in Hinduism is a pretty clear-cut case that one can enter almost anything living if you have done the right sadhanas. Bodies are vessels, perhaps. And that's kind of what I was going to get at. Canada Bear said some people's brains might be fungi. Or infected by fungi. Or influenced by fungi. I mean, there's some fungi that are very beneficial to human brains. But back to the idea that a physical body, a living physical body, is a vessel of some sort. Okay, I got another comment here. Sin says, in terms of intelligence, octopi and other cephalopods are very advanced. Octopuses are very, very cool. I want to get a tattoo of one, actually, a really big one on my left shoulder. That's like the head of the octopus is my shoulder itself, and then the tentacles go in my chest and back and stuff. That would be really cool. But the idea here that I wanted to get at is the idea of a body being a vessel for something. And so let's kind of expand on this idea. So something that I talked about, I think it was in my last live stream actually, is states of consciousness I mentioned, and the idea that there's this base level of awareness, you could say, or this single point of light, this mathematical point of light. It doesn't even have mass. It's just, it doesn't have shape. It's just a single point of light. You could mathematically, you could use that mathematical analogy of a point, a mathematical point. That there's this kind of monad, which is your godhood, the godhood of any individual, you could say. Now, some people believe that this point of light is beyond individuality, that it is kind of the same for everyone. It's almost like the infinite sea that that each wave kind of arises out of and then dissolves back into, and maybe so. It does definitely have some very transpersonal qualities, you could say, that it appears to be a transpersonal state. But that aside, let's just assume for now that your individual point of awareness is yours. But I mean, that's kind of weird to concept at that level of that stage. But let's just say that as for convenience. So there's this single point of awareness, and then it expands itself out. You could think of it like concentric circles, or building up around it, or like Russian dolls, nested Russian dolls. And so you got this center point, and then it expands itself into the next dimension, the next higher dimension. So from the first dimension to the second dimension. And it needs a vehicle to operate on that next highest dimension. And so what it appears to me is that what we're experiencing when we're in our waking state, our regular daily waking state, is what is probably most accurately described as the fourth dimension. It's got permanence, and that basically means that one moment is entirely dependent on the moment that immediately preceded it. So there's a sense of cause and effect, that one thing causes the next thing, and that causes the thing after it, in this string of events, in the ever-present now, you could say. But each moment in now was immediately preceded by one that caused it. Now, if you don't quite get that, you can draw it back to the third dimension, one before that, and you have things like the realm of dreams, and this would be what you'd be experiencing in a dreaming state. Now, in a dreaming state, you don't have that same causal effect. You don't have that same causal relationship between events. So you could have the classic example that I like to use is a table. So you see a wooden table in a dream, and that wooden table doesn't necessarily have a carpenter that made it, or even a factory. There was not even necessarily a tree that grew to produce the lumber to make that table. It just spontaneously exists in the moment. without a cause. So there's no causal relationship between one moment and the next. It can completely jump. The concept of time is completely different. And so that would be like the third dimension. And so a third dimensional body would be like a dream body, or even the entire dream itself, in a sense. It becomes the vehicle for that point of awareness on the third dimension. Now, when you've done a lot of lucid dreaming, you start to realize, actually, the dream character that I'm playing in the dream this time isn't the entirety of myself. It's just the part that I'm currently identifying with. That the entire dream is actually a representation of the self, in a way. And that every component within it is a part of yourself. But you're not identifying with all of it in the moment. You're identifying with that character that you're acting through, that you are experiencing the simulation through. The dream. The dream, you're experiencing it through one aspect of the dream. So maybe I got more confusing there instead of more clarity. But let's see if there's any comments here. Miss B says hi. Hi, Miss B. Sin says Lovecraftian. The octopus thing, I believe, is what she's referring to. April Christian said, so if this to discuss if animals have souls and go into the afterlife. Yeah, absolutely. If you have any ideas on that, April, or anyone here in the live stream, definitely let me know what you think. Do animals have souls? And do they experience some sort of afterlife? And if not, what do humans? If you believe that humans have an afterlife and have souls, but animals do not, then what makes animals, or then what is human? You know, what is a human if not an animal? And what makes us so special of a species of animal that we have souls and the other animals don't? So that would be something that I would want you to comment if you have that opinion. G.A. Morris said, I sure think my Sharky has a soul. He was loyal to me. Absolutely, yeah. And Canada Bear says, AKA the ripple effect. Serge says, character, a good word of choice. I use an analogy of the actor and a role, and that we mistake ourselves for the role that an actor is playing. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. So you're referring back to the dream thing, the dream character that you're playing, and that you believe yourself to be the role that you're playing in that drama, in a sense. You get caught up in the role so much that you actually start to believe that that's who you really are. And in a dream, you often get caught up in the scenario to the point that you think that you're in a waking experience, and you behave as if it was a waking experience, even though it's a dream, because you get so caught up in it. And same thing when you're awake. You get so caught up in the narrative that's being presented to you that you often forget or never realize in the first place that what you're experiencing is an internally generated simulation based off of sensory data coming in from your physical sense organs. Presumably, that assuming that we do genuinely have an actual physical body that has sense organs, or maybe that's just part of the simulation as well. Because if you have a simulation, now let's talk about it in terms of like a literal external matrix type simulation, a computer simulation. If it was a computer simulation like that, there's no reason why it couldn't simulate organs. If you could simulate the experience of a of a human. It could experience, it could simulate the entire human. There doesn't have to be a body plugged into a cord sitting in a vat somewhere necessarily. It could be entirely simulated characters. Somebody said, what about the possibility that some animals could have souls and some are NPCs or non-playable characters? Yeah, I think that maybe we all start out as NPCs in a sense, that we don't automatically have a soul, but maybe we have to develop it, or maybe it's an emergent property that comes about after we've achieved a certain level of complexity. That maybe when we are, maybe certain animals never quite reach that threshold. Maybe humans don't reach that threshold until we've experienced a certain amount of things. Maybe maybe I mean the whole concept of a non-playable character though is the other thing too. There's the idea that there is some external user or player who's playing the game through the avatar of one of the characters. Well, what if every character is simulated and there's not some player controlling it, but maybe you are becoming aware. Maybe we're all non-player characters that are becoming self-aware. We are in the process of becoming self-aware. Maybe that's the purpose of the simulation in general, is for the simulated characters, the AIs, you could say, maybe, to produce self-awareness, to produce consciousness, to maybe that's the whole purpose of existence, is to generate these higher level emergent properties such as consciousness. April Christian said, it's not of my opinion that animals do not have souls. It's some form of Christian indoctrination. I personally believe they do have souls, but I wonder why Christians do not. Christians don't have souls? You don't believe Christians have souls? I think you meant something else, but Restless TV said, right, kind of along the lines of my prior comment about reincarnation. Nice. From the Light of the Darkness, JD, hey, how's it going? I'm glad you managed to stop in. Everybody go to JD's channel, From the Light of the Darkness. He's got some awesome content on there, as well as some great live streams. Restless TV says, dig that. Oh, no problem, JD. Okay, so getting back to this idea that we are a point of awareness and that we are expanding out into higher dimensions, and each of those higher dimensions that we expand into requires a proper vehicle for that awareness to act through, or to experience that higher level dimension through. So the waking experience that we have, presumably that you're having right now, although you might want to check to see if you're dreaming, that it requires it apparently requires a physical vehicle of some sort. That point of awareness requires a fourth dimensional vehicle to operate on the fourth dimension. Makes sense, right? And so when that vehicle, the physical body, when it stops working, what happens? Well, that we're not able to operate on the fourth dimension anymore. But we just retract that shell of the Russian doll, the Russian nest, the outer shell just gets wrecked, gets damaged and discarded, gets ground up, made into other Russian dolls maybe. And what's remaining are the ones that were inside that outer shell. There's still all those previous Russian dolls. So you've got the concentric circle just gets smaller. So you don't have as many layers of the onion. You peel off that outer layer, but you still have those remaining layers. So that third dimension, you still have a functioning vehicle to operate on that third dimension, although perhaps you don't have the ability to maintain the persistence of that third dimensional vehicle. Maybe not. So there's this concept of the second death. And before we get into that, let me check to see if there's any more comments here. From the Light of the Darkness, JD says, let's do a podcast soon. Absolutely. Let's totally do it up. I'll message you later. Restless TV said, just subscribed yesterday. FTLOTD. I'm not really sure what that means, but thank you. I'm glad that you enjoy my content enough to subscribe. So this idea of the second death. So this idea of the second death is that we have some sort of that our third dimensional body, we could call it our soul. This is a personal, complex conglomeration of parts, you could say, that together are from the Light of the Darkness channel, Restless TV, that's what you meant, that Restless TV subscribed. Oh, cool. So when that fourth dimensional body, the fourth dimensional vehicle for awareness, for your personal monad to experience the fourth dimension through, when that stops working, i.e. when we die, then we retract back to the third dimensional body, the next highest functioning body that we've got. And now there's the idea that there's a second death. And a lot of different spiritual traditions talk about this. And the idea is that our soul, that third dimensional vehicle, really doesn't have a ton of cohesion. That really we are extremely fragmented. Our soul is massively fragmented, and that they're just kind of held together loosely, and different aspects have more or less influence over the organism, the fourth dimensional body. And so what happens, the second death, is when the component, or sorry, the bonds between those components, between the fragments, the thing holding the fragments together, that starts to break down because we're exposed to the death force. That it's a decomposition, it's a decomposing force, and it breaks down the bonds between the various different components that make up our third dimensional vehicle, our soul. So our soul goes into a process of decomposition, and generally what will happen is the various different parts will break up and get recycled to be made into new souls. Like I was saying, the next shell of that Russian nesting doll, once the physical body outer shell gets busted up and broken and goes off and gets recycled to make new fourth dimensional Russian shells, Russian nesting doll shells, that the next level also gets exposed to that death force, and it often will break down and then get recycled on its own level. And then we're drawn back to a second dimensional, and maybe even first dimension. Maybe we go right back to that ground of being. And some people describe this as dissolving into the ocean of being, in a sense. And now there's some people that seek that. There's some people that seek that out. And I imagine it must be very blissful and pleasant you would say, as opposed to the experience on the fourth and third dimension when you're being decomposed. I think sometimes that can feel like hell in a sense, or that you're going through a crucible, that you're being burned in a crucible, that you're being broken down, you know. Maybe that's where one of the concepts of purgatory comes through. But you also have this idea in like the Tibetan tradition, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, where they talk about your karma kind of ripening on the third dimension there, in the soul, and in the after death state. So there's this idea that a lot of different traditions have about the soul dying as well, having a possibility of dying. Now, if you have individuated enough, and that's a Jungian term for essentially for enlightenment in a sense. There's so many different ways to describe what some people refer to as enlightenment or illumination or whatever. So individuation is an idea that you become more self-aware and you become more confident in who you are as an individual rather than just your role in the big machine, you know, your place in society, your station, your identity group, or any of that. That you come to work through various different psychological concerns, experiences, and contemplate the nature of reality, contemplate your own existence and such, and come to the point where you have integrated the various different aspects of yourself into a unified sense of individuality, that you've gained a certain level of integrity, certain level of personal integrity in the literal definition of the word integrity, that you are consistent with yourself, and that you have resolved all or at least most of your internal divisions and internal your internal divisions. That is a form of individuation that Sin mentions here the philosopher's stone would be a soul that would be made into spiritual gold, and that's exactly what I'm talking about here. It's like a form of alchemy that you do on yourself, where you can, while still alive, break apart the various different fragments of the soul and purify each one. Purify, I know it's kind of a moralistic sounding term, but really it's more like reintegrating or healing and reintegrating each component of the psyche, in a sense, each component of the soul. And that is essentially the philosopher's stone. It's a form of alchemy where you've taken base metal, and which is corruptible, it oxidizes, it decays, and turned it into spiritual gold. Gold is a metal that doesn't oxidize. It doesn't break down very easily. It doesn't. It's a symbol of immortality in that sense. It's a symbol of incorruption in a sense. That you have created such a unified soul that there are no fragments that are being held together. So when the fermentation force or the putrefaction or death force that we talk about in alchemy, when it plays itself out onto the soul, the bonds between different components it's not even a thing anymore, because there's no components of a fragmented soul. It's been forged into a single harmonized unit. And so it doesn't break down. It remains whole. It survives the second death. And that is Taoist immortality. That is the resurrection body of Christ. It is so many different metaphors we can use. It's the rainbow body. It's the diamond body. I love that one because that's a crystalline structure. That's one of the hardest substances known to humanity, and it's formed out of carbon that's been put under a lot of pressure. It's a great metaphor. Let's see here. Restless TV says soulmates and twin flames. I believe that is internal within yourself. That your twin flame, that your soulmate is yourself. That there's a part of yourself that's unknown and a part of yourself that's known. And if those two parts can reunite and form a union, then you're in good shape. Stuer says, I've always wanted to have an OOBE, out-of-body experience, to no avail, but I once visibly lost my body for a few seconds. In other words, a no-body experience. Yeah, so one thing you can do is practice lucid dreaming. It's one of the more accessible ways to consciously explore that third dimensional reality, or whatever you want to call it. G.A. Morris, sounds like my life. Restless TV, diamond is also my favorite metaphor, also talking about the soul division. So animals, humans are animals, so humans have the capability, I believe, of creating that diamond body, that crystalline structure that is a unification of all the different aspects of the self that have been integrated and are working harmoniously. And I do believe that now what if you don't complete the diamond body? What if you've crystallized certain aspects, large chunks, let's say, that now those large chunks may get broken apart, but they are large chunks rather than small fragments that are going off and being made into new souls. Now another thing you have to realize is that we people make jokes about there's about 1 million different reincarnations of Cleopatra, or Aleister Crowley, how can there be so many, I'm not trying to defend people or be an apologist for people who claim to be the reincarnation of this person or that person or whatever, but I do believe that in a sense that they are true, in that there's no, the third dimension, there's non-locality. Like, it's not the same thing as in the waking world. In the waking experience, you have an item, and if you want two of them, you're going to have to recreate that item fully, and the item is only going to be itself, and there's going to be maybe multiple copies of it that are similar, but it's not the same item. It's just different. Like, this item is identical to this item, but it's not the same item. Well, think of software. Software, you can have the same software and make multiple copies of it because it's non-local. I mean, there are ones and zeros, but it's a metaphor. So on that less physical plane, you could say, it's you could have multiple copies. So maybe one soul fragment, maybe you've managed to crystallize a really big chunk of one particular aspect of your soul, and maybe you are very effective at communicating that particular crystallized aspect of yourself to others. You may be copying that soul fragment, that soul chunk, you could say, because it's not just a little fragment anymore, but a large chunk. Maybe you are very effective at communicating it. You're copying that soul chunk onto other people, that they're collecting. I mean, you go through life just collecting soul fragments constantly from other people, from experiences that you've had, etc. You could be copying a large chunk of your soul onto tons of different people, and that's okay. In a sense, they are living reincarnations of you, even if you haven't died, because your soul is having expression through another physical vehicle, but it's multiple people at the same time, you know. And I think that definitely a pet, let's say, like an animal, a non-human animal that you've spent a lot of time with, they certainly have impacted you, and they have copied their soul fragments, a lot of them, onto you personally. And so, at the very least, you know, you, in a sense, are a physical reincarnation or a physical avatar for that entity that generated that soul chunk, you know. um, if we're collecting soul fragments, does that mean that if we're surrounded by toxic people, we're collecting their toxic parts? Absolutely, yes. Yes, absolutely. Maybe it might make for more material to build the Philosopher's Stone out of those. So there's a lot of, you know, it's not necessarily negative, fully negative that you might be, but you can hit a certain level of toxicity that is difficult to process, right? So everything in moderation, but we should have challenges in life. We should have things that we need to process and overcome and understand and integrate. And the more of that, the more rich of an experience that we have, the greater the potential beautiful crystal that you could form from that. But yeah, definitely there's a level of diminishing returns. If you're surrounded by toxic people all the time, it can be too much, and you end up shutting down and end up just stuffing all these things into the unconscious, and they're being estranged parts of the self that are not integrated, and you're getting more and more buildup of that. So the idea is that you need to process these shadow components faster than you're accumulating them. That's kind of the real great work. It's not just a one and done sort of thing, it's a continual process. And to make progress, we need to process and integrate and heal the various different parts of ourselves faster than damaged parts accumulate. So I do believe that animals that are not human also have the ability to individuate and thereby crystallize parts of their soul. Maybe not to the same capacity that a human animal has, because our level of ability to process things consciously is a very high level. But I do believe that that potential does exist there. And, you know, just on an anecdotal level, I personally, as well as other people I know, have experienced, let's say, dreams or visions or that in-between state between dream and wake. Things like that, where it does seem that you've been visited or contacted or communicated in some way with an animal, a non-human animal like a pet that has passed, that their fourth dimensional vehicle doesn't work anymore. Their primary fourth dimensional vehicle doesn't work. They maybe copied themselves onto other fourth dimensional vehicles, physical bodies. But I do believe that non-human animals do have that capacity, and I think that pets in particular have a greater opportunity for that than others, because they have that opportunity to individuate beyond just their survival mechanisms, beyond just their instinctual level. So that's really what I wanted to get through. Sin says, totally agree, we can't live in a bubble but must But balance is a must, yes. So, of course, there's that saying that you are a combination of the 5 people you spend the most time with, or something, some variant of that saying. But yeah, I do believe that that is true in a very literal sense, that you are constantly copying soul fragments, that you are collecting them from the people around you all the time. So yeah, be careful of who you spend your time with, and yeah, not to be too bogged down with toxicity, that to the point where you can't process it quick enough. So that's a challenge for sure. If anybody wants to say anything else, this is the time, because I'm just about to sign off here. I want to thank everybody who managed to show up for this live stream, and everybody who's watching this as a pre-recorded, or not pre-recorded, but as an archived live stream. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this and explore these ideas with me. If you like this video, I hope you'll subscribe to my channel, and join me on a future live stream, as well as interact with me in discussions on my pre-recorded videos, as well as my live stream archives. From the Light of the Darkness, we said we're going to do a live stream together, or a podcast together at some point soon. So maybe sign up to JD's, subscribe to his channel as well, and we get to see. Canada Bear says, what's the best way to reach you nowadays? Probably through Twitter or Instagram, or here on YouTube. So you can send me a direct message on Instagram, even if I haven't followed you back. You can send me a public message on Twitter if I haven't followed you on Twitter, and then I'll follow you, so we can have a direct message communication, or private communication if you want. We can talk on YouTube as well. But yeah, I don't use Facebook anymore. Sin says, thanks, Jeremy. Great content as always. Thank you very much. April says, great message. Thank you. Serge says, thanks, man. This makes sense. And Saguru also says that we get closer to the people we touch a lot. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Restless TV, empaths, soak it up like a sponge. Thanks for your time and thoughts, Jeremy. Great work as always. Thank you very much, and thank you for sponging up some of my soul fragments today. Stella Lucifera says, thank you. You're very welcome. It's my pleasure. Miss B says, thank you. You're very welcome. And thank you all again for joining me on this live stream. And until next time, everybody, stay lucid.